Another interesting one, still in 1952 now. 52 was a banner year, leading up probably to the big wave in France in 1953 and 54. But in late July of 1952, we began to experience overflights over Washington. The public has been told about one, but there was a buildup of this. They began about the 22nd or 23rd of July of 1952. The first objects appeared over Washington, passed through the prohibited airspace, flew on, and disappeared. Then, on the 27th of July, a flock of them appeared over Washington at night, like a half a dozen or more, that moved through the prohibited airspace in formation. They turned the searchlights on, they sent interceptors up, and the objects successfully eluded all attempts to get them on gun camera film. Then on the night of the 29th of July, we had a score of them appear over the Capitol, and they watched them on radar. They chased them with relays of fighters. Interceptors called up one after another. They ordered one F-102 to ram one if he could, and he put it in afterburner and tried to ram one that was in front of him, and it just flew circles around him as he was flying in afterburner past him, just circled him at the fastest he could go. So there was a lot of activity going on there, and on that afternoon of the 29th of July at about 4:30 in the afternoon at Passaic, New Jersey, just above Washington, Mr. George Stock and his old father were standing out in front of Stock's yard, his house there, where he repaired lawnmowers, and they spotted a strange aircraft approaching low over the trees in the distance to the east, I guess it was. And they watched it for a minute. They could see that it wasn't not an airplane, that it wasn't a balloon, it wasn't a helicopter, it wasn't anything identifiable. And George told his father, "Keep an eye on it, I'm going to go get the camera." And his dad stayed out there in the front there to keep an eye on it, and George came out in time to start taking pictures, and he snapped the first picture. It was still on its approach towards his house there. And then he rolled the film as it passed over their heads and started passing along the ridge line of their house. They could just see it above the ridge line. He got a second picture as it neared the ridge line, another one as it was near the far end of the roof line of the house, then one where it's out over the backyard passing away, and another one where it's moving farther away, and one more picture. They got a total of 6 pictures. Now they got them in the camera, and it was clearly nothing mundane. It was so low they could have thrown something, a rock, and hit it as it passed over them. So they discussed this, and by now a neighbor had joined them also, and they decided to take the camera and the roll of film to the local newspaper and tell them the story. So they took it to the Morning Call there. And the Morning Call newspaper photo lab took the film out of the camera, processed the film, made the prints, and printed the pictures on the front page of the Passaic Morning Call. By evening of the day they appeared in the newspaper, a man came to Stock's house identifying himself as a CIA agent, which is strange because the CIA is not supposed to be operating in the domestic borders of the United States. The CIA jurisdiction is beyond the national borders, and the FBI has a jurisdiction inside of the national borders. But we find the CIA meddling all over the place here, and I don't know how they get away with it or why they do it. But anyway, the man identified himself as a CIA officer, demanded the pictures. George refused to give them up, and finally, after some negotiation, the man agreed to settle for the negatives. He'd let George keep the pictures, and he wanted to have them take them someplace and have them tested, which George agreed to after the man provided a signed, written receipt for the documents with an address and a telephone number that checked at the time. And he carried them away, and then when George tried to get them back, he tried repeatedly to get his negatives back, and there was always an excuse why they couldn't return them. This went on for 3 months. Finally, he got angry and got an attorney who was going to file a lawsuit against the office, and they returned 5 of the 6 negatives as copy prints, but they never returned the 6th one. And George has never been able to get it back. He now has passed on. The pictures went into the hands of August Roberts, who also has passed on, and now they're in my possession. But we've never found the 6th picture.
I think, you know, whichever explanation we use,